Imagine you're looking through the lens of like a high-end digital camera.
Okay.
You're filming a documentary. And, your only job is just to watch.
Right. You're not directing anything.
Exactly. You're framing a shot of two people in this warmly lit room having a quiet conversation. And you aren't interfering. You're not telling them where to sit or what to
You're
say.
just observing.
Yeah, you're just patiently waiting for the truth of that moment to unfold organically. So take that exact concept, the perfectly silent, patient observer, and drop it into the most high-stakes environment imaginable.
Wow, okay.
A room where a vulnerable person is about to reveal that they are in danger? Welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are exploring a really fascinating intersection of skills. Like what happens when we take the highly trained techniques of a documentary filmmaker, observing without interrupting, capturing without directing, and apply them to the intense world of safeguarding.
Yeah, and specifically, we're looking at the role of a DSL today. That's a designated safeguarding lead.
Right.
If you don't work in education or like institutional care, these are the professionals tasked with protecting vulnerable individuals. You'll often hear their work described as dealing with pastoral issues.
And just to clarify for everyone, pastoral in this context doesn't mean a church setting, right?
Exactly, no. It refers to managing the emotional, social, and psychological well-being of students. Basically, they're the people who get the knock on the door when something is seriously wrong in a child's life.
They're the safety net. And the premise we're looking at from our source material asks a brilliant question. Can a safeguarding professional use those exact filmmaker skills to uncover the truth?
That's a great question.
So we're going to look at how to perfectly observe reality, how to record it without contaminating it, and critically, the exact moment the filmmaker metaphor just shatters, and observation must become action.
Because it really does shatter at a certain point.
It does. Okay, let's unpack this. Before a safeguarding professional can protect anyone, they have to figure out what is actually going on. And to do that well, they have to start by acting incredibly similar to the person behind that camera lens.
Well, yeah, because observation isn't a passive activity. I mean, it's a highly skilled, intentional act. A good filmmaker doesn't just point a lens and hope for the best. They're constantly reading the room, noticing minute details, capturing subtle nuances, and critically, deliberately holding themselves back from interfering.
They're letting reality unfold before they attempt to interpret it.
Exactly. And when you translate that behavior to a safeguarding lead, it means practicing radical active listening. It means watching patterns over a long period and actively fighting the urge to draw a premature conclusion.
Which is fighting human nature. I mean, we are neurologically wired to categorize things immediately so we know how to react, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like if I see a student acting out, my brain immediately wants to label it. I want to say, oh, they're just seeking attention or they're just being defiant.
And that impulse to categorize is just a survival mechanism. But in safeguarding, it's a massive liability.
Really? A liability?
Because if you categorize too quickly, you stop observing. You literally cannot protect someone if you do not fundamentally understand what is happening in their life.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
So what this looks like in practice is holding off on that diagnosis.
Yeah.
It means watching how a student interacts on Tuesday versus Friday.
Taking the time.
Right, taking the time, listening to them speak without jumping in to finish their sentence, just because you think you know where the story's going.
It's essentially manufacturing psychological space. And a big part of that is understanding how your mere physical presence alters the reality in front of you.
Huge part of it.
Filmmakers know that subjects behave entirely differently when they feel judged, rushed, or directed.
Yeah, people close up.
So if a DSL wants the truth, they have to realize that how they show up in that room, physically and emotionally, dictates whether a student is going to open up or shut down entirely.
Because tone, posture, and emotional regulation change the literal data you receive.
The data? What do you mean?
Well, like if a student walks into an office and the professional sitting across from them has their arms crossed or they're tapping their foot or sighing because they have 3 other urgent meetings.
Which they probably do.
Right, which they probably do. But that professional has already contaminated the room. The student's nervous system will instantly read that the adult is stressed and unavailable.
Oh, so they won't talk.
Exactly. The application of this insight requires a calm, non-judgmental response. It demands an open physical posture. And perhaps the most difficult skill of all, allowing silence to hang heavily in the room without rushing to fill it.
It sounds a bit like wildlife photography, like if you stomp loudly into the clearing and snap a twig, the truth just runs away into the trees.
That's a great way to put it. You have to be completely still.
But wait, how does a DSL practically hold uncertainty when they are dealing with real-world pressures and pastoral duties? Isn't patience a luxury?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this is the absolute core professional tension of the role. It feels like a luxury, but skipping it guarantees failure.
That's a strong statement.
I mean, the pressure to solve the problem immediately is immense. But if you give in to that pressure and rush to a conclusion based on, say, a 10-minute conversation, you are constructing a false picture.
Right, and operating off a false picture means your interventions won't just be ineffective. They could actually put the child in further danger.
Exactly. Holding uncertainty means sitting in the discomfort of knowing you don't have the full story yet and just refusing to guess.
So it's an exercise in overriding that human urge to just fix it now. You just have to tolerate the messiness of not knowing.
Yep, you really do.
Okay, so let's say a professional actually masters this. They've regulated their own stress, they're sitting with an open posture, they're comfortable with the awkward silence.
Setting the stage.
Right, they've created a genuinely safe space for a student to speak. Once the student starts talking, the next massive trap is making sure the adult doesn't accidentally put their own spin on the narrative, right?
Oh, yeah. This is the mechanics of getting out of the way of the truth. Filmmakers go to incredible lengths to avoid steering a narrative.
Because they want reality.
Right. They don't put words into a subject's mouth because that creates a fabricated documentary. In safeguarding, this translates directly to the danger of leading questions.
Putting words in their mouth.
The way you ask a question can literally overwrite a vulnerable person's memory of an event.
I want to highlight a really stark rule of thumb for this from the source. Let's call it the tell me prompt versus the did they trap.
Oh, that's a brilliant distinction.
There's just a universe of difference between asking an open question like, can you tell me what happened after school? Versus asking, did he yell at you after school?
Massive difference.
The goal is to hear their authentic experience. But if a professional thinks they already know the answer, they'll default to the did they trap just to speed things up.
And the moment you ask, did he yell at you?
Yeah.
You have destroyed the integrity of the disclosure. You really have.
Wait, destroyed it just with one question?
Yeah, because you have to look at the power dynamics and the psychology of trauma. A vulnerable child sitting in a room with an authority figure is often highly suggestible.
Oh, I see.
If you introduce a scenario, even a hypothetical one, they might say yes simply to please you, or because they're scared, or because trauma has fragmented their memory and your suggestion feels plausible enough.
So you haven't captured the organic truth at all. You've just captured their reaction to your theory.
Precisely. You've directed the film.
So what does this all mean for the paperwork? If documentation isn't storytelling, isn't it just a dry, robotic transcript? Like, how do you capture the nuance we talked about earlier without interpreting it?
Well, human nature makes us want to summarize, right? We want to write, Jimmy was acting suspicious and defensive about his dad.
Right, you want to tell the story of the interaction.
But if the goal is to act like a camera lens, a statement like that is worse than useless. It's actually a dangerous distortion. Safeguarding records must reflect objective reality, not the observer's internal monologue. Documentation isn't storytelling, it's strict evidence capture. A phrase like, Jimmy was acting defensive, is an interpretation.
It's your bias.
Exactly. It's you putting a psychological filter over Jimmy's behavior. To record like a filmmaker, you have to use clinical direct language. You capture the raw data of reality just as a camera lens does, stripping away the observer's biases.
But how do you capture the emotion then? Because a dry transcript of words spoken doesn't capture a kid who is terrified.
You capture the raw data of the room. Instead of writing Jimmy was defensive, you write Jimmy crossed his arms tightly across his chest, broke eye contact, stared at the floor, and spoke in a raised volume when asked about the weekend.
Oh, I see. You're recording the physical, observable facts.
Exactly. It might feel clinical and dry to write that way, but that exactitude is what makes a safeguarding record legally and professionally trustworthy. You separate the facts from the interpretation, and you record it promptly.
Promptly, before your memory starts to add color to it.
Exactly right.
Okay, so that makes perfect sense. You record the literal pixels of the moment, not your review of the movie.
Nice way to put it.
So up to this point, our safeguarding lead has played the perfect documentary filmmaker. They've observed patiently, they haven't led the witness, and they've recorded strictly the facts.
They've done everything right.
But here is where the deep dive takes a sharp turn, because ultimately a safeguarding lead is not a filmmaker.
Not at all. And recognizing where this metaphor breaks is arguably the most vital piece of the puzzle. There is a definitive, non-negotiable line where passive observation must end and intervention must begin.
Harm overrides observation.
Absolutely. A documentary filmmaker might watch a tragic situation unfold over months because their primary duty is to capture the reality of the harm for the audience. In safeguarding, harm overrides observation entirely. Safeguarding is not neutral.
And choosing not to act is still a decision.
Yes, if there is immediate risk, you act and escalate. If there's a disclosure, you follow procedure. If a concern threshold is met, you intervene.
Here's where it gets really interesting. A filmmaker's ultimate loyalty is to the story. A DSL's loyalty is to the person. Does that mean a professional's natural human curiosity can actually become a dangerous trap if they aren't careful?
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it exposes a massive ethical trap. Curiosity is what drives great storytelling, right?
Right, we all have that inner armchair detective.
Exactly. When someone starts sharing something secretive or intense, human nature makes us want to know every single detail. But ethics define limits. You are not there to find out everything. You are there to keep the student safe.
Because if I keep asking probing questions to satisfy my own need to understand the full narrative, I'm forcing that person to relive the trauma right there in my office.
You are. You cross the line from protecting the student to actively re-traumatizing them.
Yeah.
Protection must always override exploration.
You have to know the exact moment when witnessing is no longer enough.
Right. Or, on a practical level, if you probe too deeply, you might accidentally muddy the waters of an active police investigation. Ethical responsibility has to sit higher than curiosity.
The moment that threshold is crossed, the moment there is immediate risk or a clear disclosure, you stop investigating and you start acting.
That's the breakdown of the analogy. DSLs cannot be passive observers. They have a duty of care, they must manage risk, and they must make decisions.
Outcomes matter, not just the narrative.
Exactly. It completely flips the mandate. You shift from creating space for truth to actively building a wall of protection around that truth.
But walking this tightrope is staggeringly difficult. You're asking one human being to perfectly balance silent, patient observation with decisive, immediate action.
And they have to know the exact split second to switch between the two.
Right. How do you scale that up? How does an institution ensure an entire staff actually gets this right?
It requires meticulous system design. Building an ethical safeguarding practice requires strong leadership to ensure staff listen without distorting.
So what's the first step in that system?
The first layer is the foundation. Safety and care. This isn't just like a mission statement. It's creating safe spaces and having trusted adults.
Let's ground that in reality. What does that foundation actually look like on a Tuesday morning in a high school?
Well, it looks like evaluating the literal layout of a school counselor's office. Like, is the door tucked away in a quiet corner? Or is it in the middle of the busiest hallway where every student can see who walks in?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It means ensuring there are trusted adults whose schedules actually allow them to be present. If the physical and cultural foundation of safety isn't there, the camera never even gets turned on.
Nobody will ever initiate a conversation.
Right. And then you move to the second layer, developmental pathways. This focuses on building social and relational capacity.
I find this fascinating because it's a two-way street. It's not just about training the staff, it's about training the students.
You have to give vulnerable people the tools to articulate their truth. Think about trying to get a 7-year-old to explain a complex emotional trauma.
They don't have the words.
Right. If they don't have the vocabulary, they will just act out physically. Developmental capacity means actively teaching that 7-year-old the words to say, I feel unsafe.
While simultaneously training the adults in the building to recognize that a thrown chair might actually be a disclosure of fear.
Exactly. It's teaching the subject how to speak into the microphone and teaching the crew how to listen.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And that brings us to the final layer, ethical leadership.
Leadership has to establish the boundaries we've been discussing. They have to protect their staff from burnout, so the staff can actually regulate their nervous systems enough to be calm observers.
Because you can't be a calm observer if you're completely overwhelmed yourself.
Exactly. And leaders must make the action thresholds crystal clear. Staff need to know exactly when to stop listening and when to hit the alarm. Creating the conditions for truth to emerge isn't an accident. It's a design system.
Whether you're a teacher, a manager, or just a friend trying to help someone do this, the people in your system know how to truly listen without leading.
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Do they know when to stop probing and start protecting? This has been such a revealing journey.
It really has.
The filmmaker metaphor is incredibly powerful because it teaches us the absolute discipline of watching carefully, listening deeply, and respecting the story. It forces us to realize how heavy our own presence can be in a room and how easily we can crush a fragile truth just by rushing to fix it.
Yeah, but true safeguarding demands more.
Right. Knowing the exact moment when listening is no longer enough and acting becomes a professional responsibility.
You know, we spent this whole deep dive talking about how professionals' presence shapes what a vulnerable person reveals.
Yeah.
But think about your own daily life. If your physical presence, your tone, and your silences dictate the truth you receive, what truths are the people around you hiding right now simply because of how you are showing up to listen?
Wow. That is a vital thought to carry with you. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is to just be the silent lens, waiting patiently, completely out of the way of the truth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into observation, bias, and the duty to act.
Thanks for having me.
Take these ideas into your next conversation. We'll catch you next time.